My husband's golden child sister had been living in our home for 8 months, completely rent-free. She left me to clean up after her dates and constantly demanded I handle her chores. When I finally kicked her out, my husband began secretly meeting with her to plot an ultimatum against me. My husband, Philip, 31, and I, 28, have been married for 5 years. We have 7-year-old twin boys, Owen and Trevor, and our 3-year-old daughter, Helen. I work part-time as a bookkeeper from home, managing clients 3 days a week, while Philip is employed full-time at a construction company. Let me give you some background on our family dynamics. Philip grew up in a very close-knit family, and his sister, Matilda, 29, was always the favored child. She married her college sweetheart, Ryan, at 23, and they seemed to lead a perfect life. Matilda worked as a marketing coordinator at a tech startup, and Ryan was an accountant at a mid-sized firm. They had a great apartment downtown and regularly showcased their weekend getaways and dinner dates on social media. Philip's parents, Carol and Frank, simply adored Matilda. They endlessly praised her career achievements and seemingly flawless marriage. Meanwhile, they'd make subtle jabs at me, suggesting I should be more like Matilda, more career-driven, more outgoing, more polished. It used to bother me, but over the years I learned to tune out their comparisons. About 8 months ago, Matilda's perfect world shattered. She came home early from work one day to find Ryan in bed with his boss's wife. The whole situation was incredibly messy, as Ryan had been having this affair for nearly 6 months. Matilda had suspected something was off because Ryan was constantly working late and always secretive with his phone. The divorce was swift. Matilda had solid evidence of the affair, and Ryan didn't contest most terms because he was terrified his boss would discover his infidelity. Matilda kept most of their savings and furniture, but she had to move out of their apartment since it was in Ryan's name. This is where our problems began. Philip immediately offered Matilda our guest room without even discussing it with me. He called me while I was picking up the kids from school and casually mentioned Matilda would be staying for a few weeks until she found her own place. I was blindsided but agreed, thinking she was family and going through a tough time. Matilda moved in the following weekend with 3 large suitcases and several boxes. She set up her laptop in our dining room, working remotely from there. Initially, things seemed manageable. Matilda was polite and made small efforts like setting the table or loading the dishwasher. But after the first month, everything changed. Matilda started treating our house like a hotel. She'd leave her dirty clothes in the guest bathroom for days. She'd use all the hot water in the mornings, leaving the kids and me with cold showers. She'd eat food I'd prepared for the kids' lunches without asking and never replaced anything. The absolute worst part was her expectation that I would do everything for her. She'd leave her dirty dishes on the kitchen counter right next to the dishwasher. When I asked her to put them away, she'd claim she was too swamped with work calls or meetings. She'd finish the coffee or milk and never bother to add these items to our grocery list. Matilda also started inviting friends over without checking, with us first. She'd text Philip, not me, to inform him she was having people over. These weren't quiet visits either. Her friends would come on weeknights and stay late, talking loudly in the living room while I was upstairs trying to get the kids ready for bed. I tried talking to Philip about these issues multiple times. Each time, he'd tell me Matilda was still recovering from her divorce and needed our support. He'd promised to talk to her, but nothing ever changed. When I pointed out that 3 months had passed and Matilda hadn't even started looking for apartments, Philip said she needed more time to save for a security deposit. The situation escalated when Matilda began bringing dates home. The first time, I woke up at 2 a.m. to loud talking and laughter downstairs. I went to check and found Matilda with some guy I'd never seen before. They were drinking wine on our couch, and the kitchen was a mess of snacks and dishes. I cleaned up the next morning before the kids woke up. I didn't want them seeing wine glasses and scattered food. When I confronted Matilda, she declared she was an adult and had every right to have guests. She claimed Ryan had controlled who she could and couldn't see, and she wouldn't let anyone do that to her again. Philip's response was to tell me I needed to be more understanding. He said Matilda was rediscovering herself after her controlling. Marriage and bringing dates home was part of her healing process. I couldn't believe he was taking her side again. Things hit a new low last month. Matilda started doing her laundry but would leave wet clothes in the washing machine for hours. By the time I needed to do the kids' clothes, Matilda's wet laundry would smell sour and I'd have to rewash it. When I asked her to set a timer to move her clothes promptly, she said she didn't have time to babysit laundry and that I could just move her clothes myself if I needed the machine. She also started treating me like her personal assistant. She'd ask me to pick up her dry cleaning when I ran errands, or buy her specific groceries and toiletries when I went shopping. When I reminded her, I also worked and had 3 children. To care for, she'd say that since I only worked part-time, I had more flexibility than she did. The breaking point came 2 weeks ago. Matilda's company was sending her to a conference in another state for 4 days. The night before she left, she handed me a list of things she needed me to do while she was gone. The list included watering her plants, collecting her mail, and cleaning her room because she was expecting a friend to stay in it while she was away. I stared at that list and realized Matilda had completely forgotten this was my home, not a hotel where I was the staff. She had never once thanked me for cooking meals she ate. She had never offered to pay for groceries or utilities, despite eating our food and using our internet for work daily. She had never acknowledged that an extra adult in our house meant extra work for me. When I told Philip about the list, he actually defended Matilda again. He said she was just trying to be organized and that helping her with a few simple tasks wasn't a big deal. He claimed I was being petty and unsupportive during her time of need. That night, after Philip fell asleep, I sat in the kitchen, looking at the mess Matilda had left after her late dinner. Her dirty pan was soaking in the sink. Crumbs were scattered across the counter. Her coffee mug sat on the table with dried rings beneath it. For 8 months, I had been cleaning up after Matilda while she contributed nothing but complaints and demands. She had taken over our dining room, monopolized our guest bathroom, and treated me like hired help. Meanwhile, Philip saw nothing wrong with any of this because Matilda was his precious sister who could do no wrong. The next morning, Matilda left for her conference. Before walking out the door, she reminded me about her list and said her friend Jessica would arrive Thursday evening. She even handed me an extra key and told me to make sure Jessica felt welcome. I looked at Philip, waiting for him to object to Matilda giving away keys to our house without our discussion. Instead, he simply kissed Matilda goodbye and wished her a safe trip. That's when I knew I had to take drastic action. I couldn't continue living like this, and Philip was never going to stand up to his sister. I had to handle this myself. I was planning something that would either resolve this problem permanently or create an even bigger mess. But at that point, I didn't care anymore. I was fed up with being treated like hired help in my own home. Update 1. I can't believe how much has happened since my last post. Thank you to everyone who commented and messaged me. Your support meant more than words can say. Here's what went down. The day after Matilda left for her conference, I put my plan into motion. I'd been thinking about this for weeks and knew I needed to do something dramatic to get Philip's attention and make Matilda realize she couldn't treat our home like her personal hotel. First, I packed up all of Matilda's belongings from the guest room and the dining room. I carefully folded her clothes and placed them in boxes. I packed her toiletries, books, work materials, everything. I even packed the plants she had asked me to water. I stacked all the boxes neatly in the garage. Then I changed the locks on our house. I called a locksmith that same afternoon and had new locks installed on both the front and back doors. I definitely didn't want Matilda or her friend Jessica walking into our house whenever they pleased. Next, I prepared the guest room for actual guests, my parents. I called my mom and dad and asked if they wanted to visit for the weekend. They live about 4 hours away and hadn't seen the kids in months, so they were thrilled to stay with us. Philip was working late that Thursday, so he didn't notice anything different when he came home. The boxes were in the garage, and he never goes in there anyway. My parents arrived Friday afternoon while Philip was at work and the kids were at school. When Philip came home Friday evening, he was confused to see my parents' car in the driveway. He walked inside and found my dad helping Owen with homework at the dining room table, the very spot where Matilda had been working for 8 months. Philip asked where Matilda's laptop was, and I told him I had packed up her things because she was no longer living with us. The look on his face was absolutely priceless. He started asking me what I meant, and I calmly explained that Matilda's temporary stay had stretched into 8 months of me being treated like a maid in my own home. My parents had no idea what had been going on because I hadn't wanted to worry them or cause family drama. But as Philip and I talked, they started piecing things together. My mom mentioned that I had seemed stressed and tired during our phone calls over the past few months. My dad commented that our house felt different somehow, less peaceful than usual. Philip tried to argue that Matilda needed our support and that I was being cruel. He said she would have nowhere to go when she returned from her conference on Sunday. I told him that was no longer my concern. Matilda was a grown woman with a good job, and she could figure out her own housing situation. The real explosion came when Philip called Matilda that evening to warn her about what I had done. I could hear Matilda screaming through the phone from across the room. She started calling me names and accusing me of being jealous of her success and independence. She declared she was cutting her conference short and coming home immediately to get her things. Philip handed me the phone, expecting me to apologize and back down, as I always did. Instead, I told Matilda that her belongings were safely packed and waiting for her in the garage. I said she had 24 hours to arrange to pick them up, and after that, I would donate everything to charity. Matilda completely lost it. She started yelling that I had no right to touch her things and that she was going to call the police. I calmly reminded her that she had been living in our house rent-free for 8 months and that legally she was just a guest who had overstayed her welcome. When I hung up the phone, Philip was staring at me as if he'd never seen me before. He asked how I could be so heartless to his sister when she was going through such a difficult time. I told him that Matilda's difficult time didn't give her the right to turn me into her unpaid servant. My parents witnessed this entire conversation, and I could see my dad getting increasingly upset as he grasped what had been happening in our house. After Philip stormed upstairs, my dad sat me down and asked me to tell him everything. I explained how Matilda had been treating our home like a hotel, leaving messes for me to clean, inviting people over without permission, and generally acting like I existed to serve her. I told them about the list of chores she had left for me and how she had given a key to our house to her friend without asking either Philip or me. My mom was furious. She said she couldn't believe Philip had allowed his sister to treat me that way. My dad said he was proud of me for finally standing up for myself, even though it had taken so long. Matilda showed up Saturday afternoon with 2 of her friends and a rental truck. She had driven back from her conference early just as she threatened. Philip met them in the driveway and helped them load all the boxes from the garage. Matilda never came inside the house or spoke to me directly, but I watched from the living room window as she angrily gestured toward the house while talking to Philip. I could see her friends looking uncomfortable as she ranted about the situation. After they left, Philip came inside and told me Matilda was temporarily moving in with her friend Jessica. He said Matilda was hurt and embarrassed by what I had done, and that I owed her an apology. He added that his parents would be upset when they found out how I had treated Matilda. I told Philip that I wasn't apologizing for anything. I had done what I needed to do to protect my own sanity and my family's well-being. I said if he wanted to choose his sister over his wife and children, that was his decision. My parents left Sunday afternoon, but before they went, my dad had a private conversation with Philip. I don't know exactly what was said, but Philip was quiet and thoughtful for the rest of the day. The house feels different now. It's peaceful again. The kids have been happier too, though they don't fully understand what happened. Owen asked why Aunt Matilda took all her boxes away, and I just told him she found her own place to live. Philip has been cold toward me for the past week. He answers direct questions but doesn't start conversations. He's been staying up late, watching TV instead of coming to bed at the same time as me. I know he's upset, but I don't regret what I did. Matilda hasn't contacted me directly, but she's been texting Philip constantly. He shows me some of the messages where she calls me controlling and manipulative. She says I was jealous of her independence and that I deliberately sabotaged her during a vulnerable time. Philip's parents called yesterday. Carol was furious with me for throwing Matilda out. She said family should stick together during difficult times and that I was being selfish. Frank was quieter, but he agreed with Carol that I had handled the situation poorly. I told them the same thing I told Philip and Matilda. 8 months of being treated like a maid in my own home was enough. I said Matilda was welcome to visit any time, but she couldn't live with us anymore. The strange thing is that I sleep better now than I have in months. I don't wake up dreading what mess I'll find in the kitchen or wondering who Matilda might bring home. I don't have to worry about the kids walking in on Matilda and some random guy she met at a bar. Philip is still angry, but I think deep down he knows I was right. He just can't admit it because it would mean acknowledging that his perfect sister was taking advantage of us. Some people told me I should have been more patient or found a gentler way to handle the situation, but I tried talking to Philip for months, and nothing changed. Matilda is an adult who makes good money and has plenty of friends. She didn't need to live with us for 8 months. She chose to stay because it was convenient, and because she knew I would clean up after her and Philip would never make her leave. Now she's learned that actions have consequences. And I've learned that sometimes you have to make difficult decisions to protect your own peace of mind. Update 2. Things have gotten more complicated since my last update, and I need to share what's been happening because I'm honestly not sure how to handle this situation anymore. About 2 weeks after Matilda moved out, Philip's behavior toward me started to change. Instead of being cold and distant, he became overly attentive and apologetic. He started bringing me flowers, cooking dinner without being asked, and taking the kids out on weekends so I could have time to myself. At first, I thought he had finally realized I was right about Matilda and was trying to make amends. But then Carol called me directly, which was unusual because she normally only talks to Philip. Carol told me that Matilda had been staying with her friend Jessica, but Jessica's lease was ending, and Matilda needed to find somewhere else to live quickly. Carol said Matilda had been looking at apartments but hadn't found anything affordable in a good neighborhood. Then Carol asked if Matilda could come back and stay with us for just 1 more month while she continued apartment hunting. She promised that Matilda would follow whatever rules I set and would contribute money for groceries and utilities. I told Carol, absolutely not. I explained that Matilda had 8 months to find her own place and chose not to. I said allowing her to come back would send the message that her previous behavior was acceptable. Carol got upset and said I was holding a grudge. She said Matilda had learned her lesson and would be different this time. When I refused to budge, Carol said she would talk to Philip directly. That evening, Philip brought up the possibility of Matilda staying with us again. He said it would only be for 4 weeks, and Matilda had promised to pay rent and help with household chores. He said his parents were really worried about Matilda, and that we should give her another chance. I reminded Philip about everything that had happened over the past 8 months. I asked him if he really believed Matilda would change her behavior after just 3 weeks of living somewhere else. Philip admitted that Matilda probably wouldn't change, but he said family was supposed to help each other even when it was difficult. I told Philip that if Matilda moved back in, I would take the kids and go stay with my parents until she left. Philip looked shocked and asked if I was serious. I told him I was completely serious and that I wouldn't put myself through that situation again. Philip dropped the subject that night, but over the next few days, I started noticing some concerning changes in his behavior. He was getting text messages at odd hours and would step outside to take phone calls. When I asked who was calling, he would say it was work-related or someone from his family. Last week, I discovered what was really going on. I was doing laundry and found a receipt in Philip's pants pocket from a restaurant across town. The receipt was for 2 meals and was dated from a Tuesday when Philip had told me he was working late. I didn't confront Philip immediately because I wanted to see if there were other signs that he was lying to me. Over the next few days, I paid closer attention to his schedule and behavior. Philip claimed he was working late 3 times that week. But when I called his office on Thursday to ask what time he would be home, his coworker told me Philip had left at his normal time, around 4:30. Friday evening, Philip said he was going out with his work buddies, but would be home by 10 Chores. He didn't come home until after midnight. And when he did, he smelled like perfume that wasn't mine. Saturday morning, while Philip was in the shower, I looked at his phone. I know this was wrong, but I had a feeling something was going on, and I needed the truth. I found text messages between Philip and Matilda going back to the day she moved out. In the messages, Matilda was telling Philip that I had humiliated her and ruined her life. She said she couldn't afford to live on her own and that I was destroying their family by being stubborn and unforgiving. But the worst part was Philip's responses. He was agreeing with Matilda and saying that I had changed over the past year. He told Matilda that I used to be more flexible and understanding, but that I had become rigid and controlling. In the most recent messages, Philip and Matilda were planning to meet for dinner to discuss their options. Matilda had suggested that Philip should give me an ultimatum. Either Matilda moves back in or Philip would consider leaving me. Philip had responded that he didn't want to break up our family, but that he was tired of me making decisions without considering his feelings. He said he felt like I didn't respect his relationship with his sister. I took pictures of these messages with my own phone and then put Philip's phone back where I found it. I spent the rest of Saturday processing what I had discovered. Philip wasn't just angry about Matilda moving out. He was actively plotting with Matilda to pressure me into letting her move back in. They were both convinced that I was the problem and that my refusal to accommodate Matilda was unreasonable. When Philip came home Sunday evening after another supposed work meeting, I confronted him about the text messages. I showed him the pictures I had taken and asked him to explain what was going on. Philip's face went completely red. He tried to deny that he was planning anything against me, but the evidence was right there in his own words. He said he was just trying to find a solution that would make everyone happy. I asked Philip if he really believed that giving me an ultimatum was a reasonable solution. I asked him if he thought threatening to leave me was a healthy way to resolve our disagreement about Matilda. Philip started getting defensive and said that I was the one who had created this whole mess by throwing Matilda out without warning. He said if I had just been more patient and understanding, none of this would have happened. I told Philip that his sister had spent 8 months treating me like her personal servant, and he had done nothing to stop it. I said the fact that he was now plotting with Matilda to force me to accept her back showed that he still didn't understand how wrong Matilda's behavior had been. Philip said he loved me but that he couldn't choose between his wife and his sister. He said Matilda was family, and family was supposed to be forever, while marriages sometimes ended. I couldn't believe Philip had actually said that to me. I told him that if he truly believed marriages were temporary but sibling relationships were permanent, then maybe he should go live with his sister instead of me. Philip tried to backtrack and said he didn't mean it that way. But the damage was done. I told him I needed time to think about our marriage and what I wanted to do next. For the past week, Philip has been trying to apologize and explain his behavior. He says he was just frustrated and didn't mean the things he said to Matilda. He claims he never would have actually given me an ultimatum and that he was just venting to his sister. But I keep thinking about those text messages and how Philip described me to Matilda. He called me rigid and controlling. He said I had changed and become difficult to live with. These weren't things he said in anger during a fight. These were his honest thoughts about me that he shared with someone else. I've been sleeping in the guest room for the past week while I decide what to do. The kids know something is wrong, but I haven't told them what's happening yet. I don't want to involve them in adult problems unless I have to. Matilda hasn't contacted me directly, but I know she's still texting Philip regularly. She found an apartment, but won't be able to move in for another 3 weeks. I'm sure she's still hoping Philip will convince me to let her stay with us temporarily. What bothers me most is that Philip and Matilda both seem to think I'm the villain. In this situation, they act like I threw Matilda out for no reason and that I'm being unreasonable by not giving her another chance. Neither of them acknowledges that Matilda lived with us rent-free for 8 months while treating me like hired help. Neither of them seems to understand that Philip's willingness to plot with Matilda against me is a betrayal of our marriage. I don't know if our marriage can survive this. Philip has shown me that when forced to choose between supporting me and supporting Matilda, he will choose Matilda every time. He's also shown me that he's willing to be dishonest and manipulative to get what he wants. Some people might say, I should forgive Philip and work on rebuilding our relationship, but I don't know if I can trust him anymore. If he was willing to lie to me and conspire with Matilda this time, what will he do the next time we disagree about something involving his family? Update 3. I've been getting messages asking for an update, so I wanted to let you know how everything turned out. The past 2 months have been difficult, but I think I made the right decisions. After discovering Philip's text messages with Matilda, I realized that our marriage had bigger problems than just his sister's behavior. Philip had shown me that he was willing to lie, manipulate, and conspire against me when he didn't get his way. That wasn't something I could ignore or forgive easily. I decided to take the kids and stay with my parents for a few weeks while I figured out what I wanted to do. Philip was upset when I told him we were leaving, but he didn't try to stop us. I think he knew he had crossed a line with his behavior. My parents were supportive and didn't pressure me to make any quick decisions. They helped me take care of the kids and gave me space to think about my marriage without Philip constantly trying to apologize and make excuses. While I was at my parents' house, Philip called every day to talk to the kids. During one of these calls, Owen asked Philip why we weren't living at home anymore. Philip told him that Mommy and Daddy were having some problems and needed time to work things out. After about 10 days, Philip asked if he could come visit the kids. My parents agreed to let him come for Sunday dinner, but they made it clear that this was about the children, not about reconciling our marriage. Philip drove the 4 hours to my parents' house and spent the afternoon playing with the kids in the backyard. At dinner, he was polite to my parents and didn't bring up our marital problems. But after the kids went to bed, Philip asked if we could talk privately. We sat on my parents' front porch, and Philip told me that Matilda had finally moved into her new apartment. He said she was doing well and had started dating someone new. He apologized again for the text messages and said he understood why I was upset. But then Philip said something that made me realize our marriage was truly over. He told me that while he regretted plotting with Matilda, he still believed I had been too harsh in how I handled the situation. He said a more mature approach would have been to set clearer boundaries with Matilda instead of throwing her out without warning. I reminded Philip that I had tried to set boundaries with Matilda for months and that he had consistently undermined me by making excuses for her behavior. I told him that Matilda had ignored every boundary I attempted to set because she knew Philip would support her. Philip admitted that he probably should have backed me up more, but he said Matilda had been going through a really difficult time and needed extra support. He said families were supposed to help each other even when it was inconvenient. That's when I realized that Philip still didn't understand what had gone wrong. He saw Matilda's 8-month stay as him being a good brother to a sister in need. He didn't see it as him allowing his sister to disrespect and take advantage of his wife. I told Philip that I couldn't be married to someone who would always choose his family of origin over the family we had created together. I said that if he truly believed his obligation to Matilda was more important than his obligation to me, then we didn't have a foundation for a healthy marriage. Philip tried to argue that he could find a better balance between supporting Matilda and supporting me. But I didn't believe him. The text messages had shown me his true feelings about our marriage and about me as a person. 3 weeks later, I filed for divorce. Philip was served with papers at work, and he called me crying. that evening. He begged me to reconsider and promised that things would be different if I gave him another chance. But I had already made up my mind. I had spent too many years being Philip's second priority, and I wasn't willing to live that way anymore. I wanted my children to grow up seeing me stand up for myself and demand respect in my relationships. The divorce process took about 4 months. Philip didn't fight me on custody or finances, which made everything easier. We agreed to shared custody, with the kids spending weekends and some holidays with Philip. Philip's parents were furious with me for ending the marriage. Carol called me selfish and said I was breaking up the family over petty jealousy. Frank was more diplomatic, but still made it clear that he thought I was making a mistake. Matilda never contacted me directly, but I heard through mutual friends that she was telling people I had destroyed her relationship with her brother. She claimed that Philip and I would still be married if I hadn't been so jealous of their close sibling bond. The kids adjusted to the divorce better than I expected. They were sad about their parents not living together anymore, but they seemed to understand that sometimes adults need to make difficult decisions. Owen asked me once if Philip and I stopped loving each other, and I told him that love isn't always enough to make a marriage work. I found a full-time bookkeeping job and moved into a small house about 20 minutes from where Philip and I used to live. The kids have their own rooms, and there's a backyard where they can play. It's not as nice as our old house, but it feels peaceful in a way that our old house never did during Matilda's stay. Philip has been a good father since the divorce. He picks up the kids on time, remembers their school events, and doesn't try to turn them against me. I think he realizes that maintaining a good co-parenting relationship is more important than relitigating our marriage. About 6 months after our divorce was finalized, I heard that Philip had started dating someone new. The kids mentioned that Daddy had a friend named Sarah who sometimes made them breakfast when they stayed at his apartment. I was glad that Philip was moving on with his life. Matilda got married last year to the man she started dating after moving into her apartment. According to the kids, she and Philip don't see each other as often as they used to. Philip missed her wedding because it conflicted with Owen's baseball tournament, and he chose to attend Owen's game instead. I think the divorce helped Philip realize that his children needed to be his priority, not his sister. It's unfortunate that our marriage had to end for him to learn that lesson, but at least he learned it. Looking back, I don't regret standing up to Matilda or ending my marriage with Philip. I spent too many years being accommodating and flexible while other people took advantage of me. My children are learning that it's important to set boundaries and stick to them, even when other people don't like it. I'm not dating anyone right now, but I'm open to the possibility someday. For now, I'm focused on my job, my kids, and building a life that makes me proud. I have friends who respect me, family members who support me, and children who are learning what healthy relationships look like. Sometimes people ask me if I miss being married or if I regret not trying harder to save my relationship with Philip. The answer is no. I miss some aspects of married life, but I don't miss feeling like a second-class citizen in my own home. I don't miss having my concerns dismissed or my boundaries ignored. My advice to anyone in a similar situation is to trust your instincts. If someone is treating you poorly and your partner won't address it, that tells you everything you need to know about where you stand in their priorities. Don't waste years of your life hoping that someone will suddenly start respecting you when they've shown you repeatedly that they won't. Now, let's move to the next story. My husband forced me to be a housewife and gave me an allowance. It turned out he was funding his double life with multiple women. I, 28, have been married to Stephen, 32, for 3 years. We met at a company picnic 5 years ago through our mutual friend Caleb, 30. Caleb worked with Stephen and knew I was single at the time. He introduced us, thinking we might hit it off. Stephen was charming and successful, working as a senior software engineer at a well-known tech company. I was impressed by his confidence and his ability to easily discuss complex topics. At the time, I was working as a middle school English teacher. I loved my job, especially the moments when I could see a student's face light up with understanding. Stephen seemed genuinely interested in my work, asking questions about my teaching methods and the challenges I faced in the classroom. Our relationship progressed quickly. We had our first date a week after the picnic, and from then on, we were practically inseparable. Stephen was attentive and romantic, always planning thoughtful dates and surprising me with small gifts. Within 6 months, we had moved in together, and a year later, he proposed during a weekend trip to the beach. The wedding was beautiful, everything I had dreamed of. My parents, John, 58, and Linda, 55, were thrilled. They saw Stephen as the perfect son-in-law, successful, charming, and from a good family. My best friend, Lisa, 29, was my maid of honor. She was happy for me but cautioned me about moving too fast. I brushed off her concerns, convinced that Stephen and I were meant to be. The first year of our marriage was wonderful. We both worked hard during the week and spent our weekends exploring the city, trying new restaurants or having game nights with friends. We talked about our future, including our plans to start a family someday. Things started to change around our first anniversary. Stephen began talking more and more about wanting to start a family. He'd bring it up casually at first, asking if I'd thought about baby names or what kind of parent I wanted to be. I was hesitant. I loved my job and didn't feel ready for children yet. We agreed to wait a bit longer, but Stephen kept bringing it up. Around this time, I also noticed changes in how we handled our finances. Previously, we had separate accounts and a joint account for household expenses. Stephen suggested we consolidate everything into joint accounts for better financial planning. I agreed, thinking it made sense for a married couple. However, soon after, Stephen started questioning my spending habits. He'd ask about small purchases like a coffee with a coworker or a new book. He suggested I cut back on these unnecessary expenses so we could save more for our future family. At first, I didn't think much of it. Stephen had always been more financially savvy than me, and I thought he was just being cautious. The pressure to quit my job started about 18 months into our marriage. Stephen argued that with his salary, there was no need for me to work. He painted a picture of me as a stay-at-home mom, taking care of our future children and managing the household. When I expressed doubts, he'd say things like, "Don't you want to be there for every moment of our children's lives?" Or, "My mom stayed home with me, and I turned out great, didn't I?" I tried to explain that I loved my job and wasn't ready to give it up. Teaching wasn't just a paycheck for me, it was a passion. I told him about the student who had been struggling all year but finally grasped a difficult concept, or the shy kid who found their voice through a class project. But Stephen seemed dismissive of these stories, saying that while teaching was noble, raising our own children should be my priority. After months of discussions and arguments, I reluctantly agreed to quit my job. Stephen promised we'd start trying for a baby soon, and I hoped this would improve our relationship. I gave notice at my school, and my colleagues threw me a goodbye party. I remember feeling a mix of sadness and anxiety as I packed up my classroom. For the last time. Once I stopped working, Stephen's controlling behavior escalated. He gave me an allowance for personal expenses, insisting that this was the best way to manage our budget. He wanted receipts for everything I bought and would question any purchase he deemed unnecessary. When I brought up my discomfort with this arrangement, he accused me of being ungrateful and reminded me that he was supporting us financially. I started to feel isolated and lost. Most of my friends were still working, and I felt uncomfortable explaining my situation to them. I spent my days at home trying to find purpose in household chores and meal planning. I missed the energy of the classroom and the sense of accomplishment I got from teaching. I tried to talk to Stephen about going back to work, but he always had reasons why it wasn't a good idea. "The job market is tough right now," he'd say. Or, "We're going to start trying for a baby soon anyway, so what's the point?" I felt trapped and increasingly dependent on Stephen. Things came to a head last week. I was cleaning our home office when I accidentally knocked over a stack of papers on Stephen's desk. As I was picking them up, I noticed a bank statement from an account I didn't recognize. Curiosity got the better of me, and I looked at it more closely. I was shocked to see a balance much higher than what Stephen had told me we had in savings. When Stephen got home, I confronted him about the statement. He initially got angry, accusing me of snooping through his things. But when I pressed him, he admitted that he had been hiding money in a separate account that I didn't know about. He claimed it was for our future and that he didn't trust me to be responsible with money. I was hurt and betrayed. All this time, I thought we were partners making decisions together. But Stephen had been lying to me and controlling our finances without my knowledge. I realized that I had no idea what our true financial situation was. Now I don't know what to do. I feel trapped in this marriage with no job, no savings of my own, and a husband who doesn't trust me. I'm considering leaving, but the thought of starting over with nothing is terrifying. I don't even know if I could get my teaching job back after being out of the workforce for a while. I tried talking to my parents about the situation, but they think I'm overreacting. My mom said, "All couples have disagreements about money. You should be grateful that Stephen is such a good provider." My dad added, "He's just trying to secure your future. You should trust his judgment." On the other hand, when I told Lisa about what was happening, she was furious. She said Stephen's behavior was financial abuse and urged me to leave him immediately. "You're smart and capable, Sarah," she told me. "You don't need a man who treats you like a child." I'm torn between these conflicting pieces of advice. Part of me still loves Stephen and wants to believe we can fix this. We've built a life together, and the thought of throwing it all away is heartbreaking. But another part of me feels betrayed and wants out. I'm tired of feeling controlled and undervalued. I keep thinking about my students and the lessons I taught them about self-respect and standing up for themselves. Am I being a hypocrite by staying in this situation? Or am I giving up too easily on my marriage? I don't know what the right decision is. Should I try to salvage this marriage? Is there a way to regain trust and equality in our relationship? Or should I leave and try to rebuild my life on my own? Any advice would be appreciated. Update 1. Thank you all for your advice and support on my last post. The past 2 weeks have been intense, and I wanted to give you an update on what's happened. After reading your comments and doing some research, I realized that Stephen's behavior was indeed financial abuse. I decided to confront him about it and demand changes in our relationship. I spent a day preparing what I wanted to say, writing down key points so I wouldn't get flustered during the conversation. When Stephen got home from work, I sat him down and told him we needed to talk. I explained how his controlling behavior made me feel trapped, undervalued, and disrespected. I told him I wanted to go back to work and have equal say in our finances. I also demanded full transparency about our financial situation. To my surprise, Stephen seemed receptive. He apologized for his behavior and promised to do better. He said he hadn't realized how his actions were affecting me and that he wanted to make things right. For a few days, things seemed to improve. Stephen gave me access to all our accounts, including the hidden one, and supported my decision to look for a job. He even offered to help update my resume. I started to feel hopeful that we could work things out. I began looking for teaching positions and reached out to some of my old colleagues to see if they knew of any openings. I also started going through our finances, trying to get a clear picture of our situation. However, things took an unexpected turn when I received a call from an unknown number. When I answered, a woman's voice asked, "Is this Sarah, Stephen's wife?" My stomach dropped as she continued, "I'm sorry to tell you this, but I'm pregnant with Stephen's child." The woman, who introduced herself as Rachel, said she and Stephen had been having an affair for the past year. According to her, Stephen had promised to leave me and start a new life with her. She said she was calling because Stephen had stopped responding to her messages and she wanted to know what was going on. I was in shock. I thanked Rachel for telling me and ended the call. Then I sat on the couch trying to process what I had just learned. When Stephen got home, I confronted him immediately. At first, he denied everything, accusing Rachel of lying. But when I told him I would contact Rachel for more details, he broke down and admitted to the affair. Stephen begged me for forgiveness, saying it was a mistake and that he wanted to make our marriage work. He claimed Rachel meant nothing to him and that he had ended things with her when he realized how much he was risking. I was devastated. Not only had Stephen been controlling and lying about our finances, but he had also been cheating on me. All the trust I had in him was completely shattered. I thought about all the times he had questioned my spending or my whereabouts, and I realized he had been projecting his own infidelity onto me. In the midst of this chaos, I decided to do some more digging into our finances. Remember the hidden account I mentioned in my last post? Well, I went through the transactions and found something that made me sick. Stephen had been using that money to fund his affair with Rachel. There were charges for expensive restaurants, weekend getaways, and even jewelry stores. All this time, he had been pinching pennies at home while lavishing money on his mistress. I confronted Stephen about this too, and he couldn't deny it. He broke down crying, saying he had made a huge mistake and would do anything to fix our marriage. He offered to go to couples therapy, give me complete control of our finances. Whatever it took to regain my trust. But I don't know if I can ever trust him again. The man I thought I knew and loved has turned out to be a liar and a cheater. I feel like my whole world has been turned upside down. I've moved out of our house and I'm staying with Lisa for now. She's been incredibly supportive, offering me a safe place to stay and a shoulder to cry on. Stephen keeps calling and texting, begging for another chance. He's promising therapy, complete financial transparency, and says he'll do whatever it takes to save our marriage. My parents are still pushing me to work things out with Stephen. When I told them about the affair, my mom said, "Men make mistakes. Sarah, if he's truly sorry, you should give him another chance." My dad added, "Think about your future. Do you really want to throw away your marriage over one indiscretion?" Their words make me doubt myself. Am I being too hasty in leaving? Should I give Stephen another chance to prove he can change? Lisa and most of my friends think I should divorce him immediately. Lisa pointed out that Stephen has shown a pattern of deception, and there's no guarantee he won't do it again. My old colleague Emily reminded me of how much I love teaching and said this could be an opportunity to reclaim my career and independence. I'm torn between my feelings for the man I thought Stephen was and the reality of who he actually is. Part of me wants to believe he can change, that we can rebuild our marriage stronger than before. But another part feels like too much damage has been done. How can I ever trust him again after so many lies? I've started looking into divorce lawyers just to understand my options, but I haven't made any definitive decisions yet. I keep thinking about the life I thought we were building together and wondering if it was all a lie. What should I do? Is there any coming back from this level of betrayal? Or should I cut my losses and start over on my own? Has anyone been in a similar situation and managed to rebuild trust? Or is it better to make a clean break? Any advice would be appreciated as I try to navigate this difficult situation. Update 2. It's been a month since my last update, and I wanted to share what's happened since then. After much soul-searching and many conversations with friends and family, I decided to file for divorce. The betrayal and lies were too much to overcome, and I realized I couldn't trust Stephen again. When I told Stephen about my decision, he didn't take it well. He alternated between begging me to reconsider and getting angry, accusing me of throwing away our marriage. He brought up all the good times we had together and promised he would change. But I stood my ground, remembering all the advice I'd received from you and my friends. As I started the divorce process, I uncovered even more of Stephen's deceptions. It turns out the affair with Rachel wasn't a one-time thing or even a year-long affair. Stephen had been cheating on me with multiple women throughout our entire marriage. I found evidence of at least 3 other women he had been involved with. There were hotel receipts, secret email accounts, and even a hidden phone. It was like discovering a whole other life that Stephen had been living behind my back. One of the other women, Amanda, reached out to me after finding out about the divorce. She told me she had been seeing Stephen on and off for 2 years, and He had told her he was separated. I thanked her for her honesty and asked if she would be willing to provide a statement for my divorce proceedings if needed. She agreed, saying she felt terrible for her part in the deception. The most shocking revelation came when I found out that Stephen had a 6-year-old son from a previous relationship that he had never told me about. I discovered this when I found regular payments to a woman named Olivia in our bank statements. When I confronted Stephen about it, he finally admitted that he had a child from a brief relationship before we met. He had been paying child support in secret all this time. I was floored. How could I have been so blind to all of this? I thought back to all the times Stephen had to work late or go on business trips, all the times he was distant or distracted. It all made sense now. When confronted with all this evidence, Stephen finally broke down and admitted everything. He said he had a sex addiction and had been struggling with it for years. He begged me to give him another chance, saying he would get help and change. But for me, it was too late. The Stephen I thought I knew never existed. Our entire relationship had been built on lies and deception. I couldn't help but think about all the times he made me feel guilty for small purchases or for wanting to maintain my independence, all while he was spending money on his affairs and secret child. The divorce process has been messy. Stephen is now trying to claim that I knew about his affairs and was okay with them, which is completely false. He's also trying to hide assets to avoid a fair settlement. He's arguing that since I wasn't working, I'm not entitled to much of our marital assets. Thankfully, I have a good lawyer who is fighting for my rights. We've managed to uncover most of Stephen's hidden assets, including some investments he never told me about. It looks like I'll be getting a fair settlement, which will give me the financial cushion I need to restart my life. Through all of this, I've learned a valuable lesson about the importance of financial independence. I've started a new job as a teacher again, thanks to a recommendation from my old principal. It feels great to be back in the classroom and earning my own money. My parents finally came around after I showed them evidence of Stephen's multiple affairs and hidden child. They apologized for pushing me to stay with him and have been supportive of my decision to divorce. My mom even offered to let me move back home while I get back on my feet. But I decided to stay with Lisa for now. I'm still processing everything that's happened, but I know I made the right decision in leaving. It's been hard, but I'm looking forward to building a new life for myself, one based on honesty and trust. Update 3. It's been 6 months since my last update, and I wanted to share how things have progressed. The divorce is finally finalized. It was a long and difficult process, but it's over now. Despite Stephen's attempts to hide assets, my lawyer was able to secure a fair settlement for me. I received half of our marital assets, including a portion of the money from Stephen's hidden accounts and investments. I'm fully settled into my new life now. I'm still teaching and loving every minute of it. I was worried that the gap in my employment would make it hard to get back into the profession, but my skills came back quickly. The financial independence feels amazing after years of being controlled. I've moved into a small apartment of my own, and I'm slowly furnishing it the way I want. It's not as big or luxurious as the house I shared with Stephen, but it's mine, and that makes all the difference. Stephen tried to contact me a few times after the divorce was finalized. He said he had started therapy for his sex addiction and wanted to apologize. At first, I ignored his messages, but eventually, I agreed to meet him in a public place. He seemed genuinely remorseful and explained that he was working on himself. I appreciated the gesture, but I made it clear that while I accepted his apology, I didn't want to have any further contact with him beyond what was necessary for finalizing our divorce. I've since blocked his number and all his social media accounts. Rachel, the woman who was pregnant with Stephen's child, reached out to me recently. She had the baby, a little boy. She apologized for her part in the affair, saying Stephen had lied to her too, claiming we were separated. We had a long talk, and I actually feel a sense of camaraderie with her now. We were both deceived by the same man. She's struggling as a single mom, and while I have no obligation to her or the child, I found myself offering her advice and support occasionally. I also met with Olivia, the mother of Stephen's older child. She was shocked to learn that Stephen had kept their son a secret from me throughout our marriage. We talked for hours, and she filled in a lot of blanks about Stephen's past. It was painful to hear, but it helped me realize that Stephen's issues went far beyond what I had imagined. My parents have been incredibly supportive during this transition. They helped me move and get settled in my new place. My dad even repainted the entire apartment for me. They've apologized multiple times for initially pushing me to stay with Stephen, saying they now understand how toxic the situation was. I've started seeing a therapist to work through the trauma of Stephen's betrayal. It's been helpful in processing my emotions and rebuilding my self-esteem. I'm learning to trust my instincts again and to recognize red flags in relationships. Professionally, things are going well. I've taken on some additional responsibilities at school, including leading a new literacy program. It feels good to be valued for my skills and to have control over my career again. I'm not ready to date yet, but I'm hopeful about the future. For now, I'm focusing on myself, my career, my friendships, and my own personal growth. I've rekindled old friendships that had fallen by the wayside during my marriage and have made new friends through a local book club. Financially, I'm doing okay. The settlement from the divorce gave me a good starting point, and I'm learning to budget and save on my own. I've even started a small investment account, determined to secure my own financial future. Looking back, I can see all the red flags I missed with Stephen: the controlling behavior, the secretiveness about finances, the sudden trips, and late nights at work. But I don't blame myself anymore. I've learned valuable lessons about trust, independence, and self-worth. There are still tough days when I miss the life I thought I had or when I feel angry about all the lies, but overall, I'm happier and more at peace than I've been in years. I'm rediscovering who I am without Stephen's influence.